Whilst this video is a short video trying to explain the fundamentals about the paper I've written, the scientific paper, which does include explanations in layman terms, is actually still over 130 pages long. So I've done a tiny booklet here, it's 2 to 3 minutes read, which explains what it's about for those who want to reference it at the beginning. This gives a concept of what it's about. What this video does is expand on that and explain it in a bit more detail, but enough for everyone to understand what's happened with this, the most important work I've ever done. Hello and welcome to another video of mine, and a very, very important one. This video is based upon the work I've done, the scientific work I've done in looking at, well, how can we explain all the temperatures? So I've taken the satellite records since 1983, when we had reliable satellite records starting, and I've built a model that actually matches it completely. So it's absolutely spot on. It's so spot on, I'm going to go right to the end result now, and here it is. Now this is a graph of the satellite temperature records from the University of Alabama. That's the recognized authority on the satellite temperatures. And that records the temperatures of the lower troposphere. That's the atmosphere we live in. And my work is spot on all the way through. So as you can see, the model fits the observed data basically perfectly. How can that be? Because in science, if that came to me, I would say, sorry, that's fiddled. That's been curve fitted. You've adjusted things to fit. But I hadn't. And what I've done because of that is the vast bulk of the paper is, well, after taking lots of tests in the body to prove it's right, I then kept adding appendices, doing test after test after test, to see, you know, is this really right? Does it pass this test? And it passes them all with flying colours. No one could have done more tests to make sure this is right. But above all, I suppose, you have to look at why it's right underneath. Because if this is right, it shakes the world of climate science. It really does, because here at last is an explanation how the natural part of the variations in the temperatures is explained, along with the CO2 part. The CO2 part, as you'll see, is going to be very minor, but it's always there, which I've always stated. And what we're going to explain in this video is how this is constructed. Now, the paper I've written is here. Wow, that looks like a really, really important paper with that title. Forget it. You know what I've done? Right through the paper in blue text, I've put an intro to each section and the results. So as a layperson, all you have to do to understand how the model's worked out, what it's based on, is just read the blue bits. And it doesn't take you long to skip through the whole paper that way. And you'll find out what extremes I've gone to test this paper as a valid document. Now, the other thing it does, this paper, and I'll come to the summary now, is it allows for the CO2 that's been worked out with the work I've been showing from William Happer and Vingarten. I've been showing that work, that works out, if you double CO2, you get about a 1 degree centigrade increase in temperature. And by the way, the alarmists say the same. They accept all this, so both sides agree on that. Where do they differ? Well, they differ here. They differ because the alarmists say that any warming, like that 1 degree warming, doesn't matter what caused it, any warming will cause more warming because of the water vapour, something I've never accepted. So here is a graph of all the IPCC different models. There's actually 100 in all, but they've got, I think, just 60 here. And they're all the grey squiggly lines. And the red line is the average of those squiggly lines. That's not a basis for scientific. That's not a scientific basis, of course, for doing a prediction, taking an average of all the wrong things, as it were, because they all can be wrong, or maybe only one of them could be right. But if you look at the actual data from the satellites, you'll see it's totally different. I think the faint green line there is probably the balloons, because the balloon data agrees with the satellite data. So you can see the models are all running far too warm, far too hot. And that's because they all have this feedback built in to them. And therefore that is the difference, the feedback. Now what I've modelled is the actual annual data of the satellite data, which is a more jagged version, if you like, of the smooth data there. That's what I've modelled. And you can see why you have a whole range of different opinions on feedback. In my view, none of which are right. there basically isn't any, in practice, feedback. There's no positive feedback, meaning that any warming will cause more warming. That is really thrown out the window by this paper. Now here we are with the normal CO2 IPCC, the nearest model to it, if you like, the best of them, for this fit, and you can see it's all over the place. And if you look here at the peaks, whilst my model and the actual temperatures are the same basically, you can see how the peaks are being missed here and here by that climate model. So what do they do in those peaks when these peaks happen? They simply try to scare you.
Hello, I'm Lucy Hockings. Welcome to BBC News Now. 3 hours of fast-moving news, interviews and reaction. We start with some breaking news this hour. In the past minute or so, European scientists have said that 2023 left the records tumbling like dominoes, confirming it was the hottest year ever recorded. The average global temperature was 14.98 Celsius. That beats the previous hottest year set in 2016 by 0.17 Celsius. This is according to the EU's climate change service Copernicus. The Met Office in the UK believes this record as well could be short-lived. Their forecasts suggest that 2024 could be even hotter.
Bad luck. Well, 2024 was even cooler. You got it wrong. But look at your peak they were estimating there, and look at mine. So now, those hot years, we can tell what's caused them with my model. We can close the door on all that fakery and alarmism. And now to explain the basis of my model. Yes, except for a tiny bit of geothermal, our energy comes from the sun. And it comes in the form of shortwave radiation that bounces off those white clouds back into space, but where it penetrates, it in particular penetrates into our oceans. Our oceans contain 1,000 times so more heat than the atmosphere does. I'll repeat that. Our oceans hold 1,000 times more heat than the atmosphere does. So the clear controls here are the clouds. How much clouds are there? Well, according to NASA, on average, about 67% of the Earth at any one time is covered by clouds. How much ocean is there? The Earth has 71% of it covered by oceans. That's why we're the blue planet. So now it's time to get into the model I've constructed that gives these remarkable results. And it starts off, as you would expect, with the sun. So it looks at the radiation coming in from the sun. That's the first part, and how that varies. Now, in the 42 years, it hasn't varied very much, although there have been the 11-year sun cycles in it, of course. So that's the first part of the model that we put in. But the biggest part of all my model is what happens with the oceans. Those oceans that have this huge amount of heat in them. Some of it bubbles up 1,000 years later. It's an enormous heat sink, and it dwarfs. I mean, the atmosphere in total is 1,000th part of what the oceans have. And it bubbles up with heat here and there and everywhere, as it were, over time. And they've all got different cycles. So we'll take a quick look at those cycles. And imagine warming up the Atlantic from the equator right up to the Arctic. So it pulses warm and it pulses cold on a 69-year or so cycle. Let's say about 35 years or so, one way warm, 35 years cool. That is called the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation. And here it is. An enormous amount of heat comes up in the Atlantic and basically warms the atmosphere. It then cools and sucks the heat out of the atmosphere. It's a pulse. It's a major ocean pulse. But not to be left alone, the Pacific itself has its own oscillations, and they're a bit more complicated. But just like the Atlantic, they warm and cool on a massive scale. It's called a Pacific decadal oscillation, or PDO. But in addition to the PDO in the Pacific, we have the La Nina, the famous La Nina, the cool period, and we also have the warm period there, the El Nino. These are quite famous, and the temperature range there seems to be greater. And last but not least, the Indian Ocean dipole, Well, this sort of wobbles like a set of scales. It's a major factor with monsoons, of course, and actually can cause extremes in places like Dubai.
Shattering records in a desert metropolis known for being hot and dry.
And just to complicate things, when the Indian Ocean dipole tends to be in a strong warm phase, the El Nino tends to be in a strong hot phase. Well, we all know that you can't warm up a bath or even make a cup of coffee by using, say, a lady's hairdryer and doing it that way. We all know that. But unbelievably, but believe it or not, the climate alarmists seem to think you can warm the oceans by having warmer air because of CO2, of course. And that doesn't work. What warms the oceans is shortwave radiation from the sun. And that matters when the clouds get out the way. When the clouds are out the way, you're nice and sunny, you get a lot of radiation. When that cloud comes over, it cuts it off immediately. You can feel the effect immediately. We all know this. So when the oceans are in the warm phases, there are fewer clouds above them. If there's fewer clouds, there's more shortwave radiation heating up the ocean, and it can heat it up down to a depth of 100 meters or more. Not like the surface atmosphere, which can only penetrate a millimeter or two. And when the oceans are in their cold phases, they suck in the heat. They actually suck in the CO2 as well, but they suck in the heat, and it gets cooler, so it changes the temperature, and it reduces that radiation into the sea and the warming of the sea. Now to explain this model after that first 10 minutes of background. All I did was create an oceanic index. That's an index because I'm measuring global warming. I had to take all the cycles as they combine, so look at them all at once in each year and see how much each contributes each year. And having done that, I'm able to apply that to the actual model. But I also have to take into account the seasonal cycles of the sun. And there is still one more element. Underneath all that, there is an accepted warming by CO2 that both sides agree on, that I've already explained. Both sides agree on around about 1 degree centigrade warming for a doubling of CO2. That would take us another 175 years to get that. It doesn't mean to say the Earth would warm by that. It means to say the effect of the actual CO2 would be that, because there'd be pluses and minuses caused by bigger factors. And the biggest factor of all are the oceans. So combining this index and putting it through into the model and comparing it to satellite temperatures, this is what I got. It was a perfect fit to the satellite data. Absolutely perfect. And that is a warning sign. That is alarming. And anyone, any professional looking at it would say, well, that's been fiddled. What you've done is you've fitted the data to the temperature and you've adjusted it so it all fits. But I hadn't. And so all I had to do then, and I don't blame anyone for criticising it and looking at it, all I had to do then was put all the tests against what we could call curve fitting. But it went much further than that. And in the end, onto my paper, I added over 20 appendices. And those 20 appendices looked at every single aspect of this. And they all worked out that it came through with flying colours, which is still a problem. So I would really love someone to put me out of my misery on this, because it's too good to be true. And therefore I'd like someone to explain to me what I've done wrong. I know the basic physics are right. I know what I've explained is right. And I know that the idea that positive feedback caused by any warming, which the alarmists have, so they say 1 degree centigrade warming from CO2 will cause 3 or 4 or 5 degrees because of positive feedback. That's nonsense, because they agree that any cause, doesn't have to be CO2, any warming will cause positive feedback, and that doesn't make sense to me. And that is the fundamental difference between the two sides, really. But there is CO2 in this model, and the CO2 in the model is the equivalent, if you like, of the 1 degree centigrade for a doubling of CO2. That's what's built in to the model, and it works perfectly. And then I try to vary the model. I try to say, let's vary it, as I've explained before. It doesn't work. So what it's showing is the only way this works is for there to be no positive feedback from the increase in CO2 that the alarmists claim. So that's the situation as it is now. I don't mind being proven wrong on this, by the way. I'm only interested in the truth. This paper, I do not identify it with me. It doesn't matter who did this. All I'm doing is trying to search for the truth. That's it. I am not trying to associate myself with it. So if someone proves it wrong, will I be disappointed? No, I'd probably be relieved, because I'd rather know the truth than carry on living in a world that's wrong. That's the entire basis of what science should be. I wish it was like that these days, but it's not. People associate their own egos and their own things with it. Well, I'm not doing that, not at all. So I don't mind being proven wrong, but I do ask for honest debate. Honest debate, that's all. Well, the question might be, well, Paul, if you're so absolutely right about this paper, I'll just
why
deal
not
with an obvious question.
take the academic
Why
route
haven't
and
I
publish it
prepared
through
this
the
paper
journals?
purely academic? I mean, all the academic stuff's there, but why haven't I prepared it in a purely academic manner and submitted it to the journals? And the answer is simple. I've watched really good people on our side of the debate, scientists and academics present papers which were totally correct, told the maths were wrong, held up for years, etc., before they eventually got published. The system is biased and it's corrupt. I'm not interested in it. Anybody can review this paper, academic or layman, I don't care who you are, you can review it. And I welcome any peer review. I really, really do. But I don't trust that system. That's number one. Number two, I haven't got time to mess about. We are being so hurt by the net zero madness. I want to get this information out to everybody, and I want everyone to look at it and have a go at it. That's fine. Again, I'm not scared of being proved wrong, and if someone can prove me wrong, I really, really welcome it. Okay, so that's the situation. This is why I've done it the way I've done it. And so I've done this accompanying video, which is a good intro to the paper. Now, I will say this, it really is worth going through the appendices, because some of them really delve into the CO2 question, etc., using this model. Because what this model shows, and I know people will argue with me, but it shows there's only a limited role of, if you like, CO2 that's quietly going away in the background, working away at its 1 degree every 175 years. Fine, no problem. We welcome that degree, by the way. Another degree on today's climate would be very, very welcome. So that's it. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I ask you to read the paper. I have provided links below in both a Word document and in a PDF. You can choose which one you want to read it in. If you want to make notes for questions, and the Word document obviously will be easier. You can put them in red or something between the segments and ask questions later. I'll happily answer any question. And there will be some follow-up videos on this subject, because it is so important. Because if what I've done is right, if what I've done is true, the entire climate alarmism movement has gone. It's as simple as that. Thank you very much for watching.